I'm Fox 10 investigative reporter Justin Lum, coming from Phoenix, Arizona. We're covering the Chad Daybell case, the trial, and the verdict that led to the death penalty sentence for the so-called Doomsday Prophet. A lot to cover, but now a huge major development in this saga is Chad Daybell has been found guilty of murdering his wife and the two children who used to live in Arizona, the two children of his now current wife, Lori Vallow, also convicted killer. I'm joined by Tracy Bradley, juror number 11 in this trial, sat in that jury in that courtroom for around 9 weeks and was a part of this huge decision and deliberation. Tracy, thank you for being here. And I just have to ask, how are you feeling right now after giving up 2 months of your life and being part of such a high profile case?
It's exhausting. It's surreal. I don't think we'll ever go through anything like that again. At the same time, all of us, all 17 of us jurors, the 12 that were there and the 5 alternates, came away, though, feeling completely at ease that we made the correct decision based on all of the evidence, all of the hours and days, and then following the guidelines we were given by the state. We really couldn't have come up with a different decision.
I mean, there was about 80 witnesses in total that you saw. I said 67 called on by the state, and then 11 more called by the defense, and then you had 6 rebuttals. Some were witnesses you had seen in the past. You had some recalls, but pretty much dozens of people that you heard from, and so much circumstantial evidence. Is that what did it for you guys? Really seeing text messages and phone calls, things like that?
Yes, it was putting all the pieces together. It wasn't just so there were the GPS tracking where they got the pings on Alex's phone or Chad's phone, and then of course the text messages and the emails, and seeing at the same time that, say, Alex was at one spot on Chad's property. 10 minutes before that, Chad had 10 calls to Alex. So it was all the different pieces and parts, and you put them all together. And I guess it takes that long to see all those different pieces. And that's what really did it. The text, though, the text and emails, they were the biggest part because we got to actually see what Chad said.
And so for you, even though there were no documented pings from Chad's phone on his property, you knew that was his home. He lived there, and
right. And he was talking to Alex both days, both at the time that they assumed that JJ was buried and at the time that Tylee was potentially burnt and buried at his property. Chad had called Alex about 20 minutes before that, and Alex shows up at the property at those exact locations on his property. And then it was shown at the end that Chad had turned off, he'd done searches and turned off all tracking devices, location devices on his phones. In addition to, I think they each had at least 5 or 6 burner phones, both Lori, Chad, and Alex.
So that was obviously suspicious to you that they were working in code, working with burner phones, and the way they communicated. How bizarre was it to hear those text messages read?
It was very bizarre. I mean, from the beginning, of course, when you start with the Lori and Chad part, I think the defense tried to portray it that it was just an affair. Yes, it was an affair, but that's why he has burner phones. That's why he turns off location. But once you start pulling Alex into the mix, and when Charles was killed, and that just started, that July, I think, was the beginning. Well, the beginning was when, of course, Lori and Chad met. But the beginning, I think, of this whole case, as far as when the murder started, when the killing started, that was in July of that year. And then by September, both kids were killed. And in October, his wife was killed. And then in November 5th, they were married.
Yeah, it was very quick. Now, you seem like a note taker. Are you an avid note taker?
I like listening really well.
Okay.
And they provided some really good timelines, both the FBI and the people that did the GPS pings. And of course, the prosecution started out that way, where they had the timeline broken down from the time that Lori and Chad met till the time they found the children on the property. And when you actually see it and look at the dates, it's mind-boggling how it truly was just very, very succinct. And there was anywhere from 10 days to 2 weeks in between each instance.
because it seems like you remember dates well, or at least
Mhm.
you've heard these dates so much
So
over
much.
8 weeks, 9 weeks. I mean,
Yep.
July 11, 2019, Charles
Yep.
Vallow's killed in Arizona. And then, September 8th is the last sighting of Tylee Ryan, 2019. And the September 23rd, we know for JJ. And then Tammy in October of
Right.
2019. So it all, and how much did you consider? I know as far as your jury instructions, you couldn't really take the Arizona evidence into account. It was a
Mhm.
404B law or rule, but it provided context to what led up to this. I mean, how much did you take away from what was happening here in Arizona?
Well, it was the beginning. I mean, that's the only way this whole thing could start was because Charles had to be out of the picture. Plus, she had to what she thought she was going to get his life insurance, and ended up not. But she was going to get over $4,000 a month for JJ and for her being a mother of JJ when Charles was gone. So to begin the whole process of fulfilling the plan that Chad had, the plan of them being in Hawaii together and being married finally again, and then of course his idea of them leading the 144,000 second coming. It all had to start with Charles, and Lori was living in Arizona, as you know, so they had to get that out of the way first, and then moved to Idaho at the beginning of September. So that was the beginning, and it was part of the story.
Well, money, power, and sex, right?
Yep.
Was the
Yep.
theme the prosecution gave to you guys. Do you think, though, was more religion or more of this affair or more
Oh.
or 50-50? I mean, because when you boil it down, these two really just wanted to be together, but yet they
Mhm.
didn't believe in divorcing
Right.
their spouses.
Right.
But obviously if their spouses were to die, then they would be
Right.
getting money. I mean, in a divorce, you could get paid, benefits as well. But I
Mhm.
mean, yeah, that's why I'm asking jurors, just what do you think is really the root here?
I think Chad and Lori, for that matter, they had unique religious views before this. We know that Chad moved up to Rexburg from Utah, taking his whole family up there because he thought that there was going to be these massive earthquakes in Utah, and he was going to help rebuild and make Rexburg the city of light. And that was in 2015. And of course, he was writing his books all about the second coming and being prepared. So he had that all along. And he also thought he was able to see visions through his portal in his closet. And he was the only one that had that much of that ability because he originally was James, who sat at the side of Jesus at the Last Supper. So he had those ideas already. And then you have Lori, who I think she'd been going to some of these conferences with her friends, and she meets Chad. So not only now is Chad seeing this beautiful blonde goddess, he called her, that's where the sex part came in, but she's interested in what he has to say. So it's like you hit the lottery. You've got this woman that believes everything that Chad says, and he knows it all. And now he's telling her that they were married in prior lives, and that they're going to lead the second coming. And then you have Chad, who's been with one woman his whole life, and now Lori is actually paying attention to him and wants to be with him, and believes what he says and does what he says, and brings Alex into the picture. And now he has his minion, for lack of a better word, that will do whatever he says. So it was kind of a perfect combination for some awful, terrible, horrific play out.
How soon did you really understand all of this? How many weeks do you think it took you?
Um, oh boy. I bet 3 or 4 to start getting because you first need to get the timelines down, and then you need to hear all of the or read all of the some excerpts out of his books and the emails and the texts, and then and you start hearing some of the people that testified, the Melanie Gibbs and people that also had the same kind of beliefs, but yet I think realized that they had taken him to the extreme. So the first 2 or 3 weeks, I think, was more just informational gathering. You didn't get the whole picture.
Was there a testimony that sticks out to you most?
Um, well, at the end, during the rebuttal, when they brought in Garth, who was Chad's son. So originally, the story was from Chad was that the day that Tammy died, or the night that Tammy died, she was sick. She went to bed. Chad went to bed, and at 5 a.m., she rolled out of bed, and she had been dead for 5 hours. Garth was the only other person in the house. What we learned through Garth's testimony and a few others is that Garth actually was at a job working as a haunted house character and didn't come home until 1:30 in the morning, which at that time, if you follow what the coroners or the medical examiners had said, Tammy was dead at that point, because when Chad actually called 911, they estimate that Tammy had been dead for 5 to 6 hours already, but with the condition of her body. So when Garth got home, Tammy was dead. It was a matter of, do you believe what Garth said? And Garth had said he saw his parents' bed. There were 2 lumps in it, and his dad was snoring. And then Garth went to his room and didn't come out again until his dad called him at 5 or 6 a.m. to say, help me with your mom. But this friend of Garth's who he worked with testified right at the end that Garth came back to work about 5 days after his mom passed away. And this friend asked him, well, what happened? And Garth told the friend, I came home and my mom was blue and cold, had blue lips and was cold, and dad wasn't there. So it was a direct, difference of what Garth was saying. And it kind of tied all the pieces together, because I don't think this friend, actually it was just a coworker, not even really a friend, didn't have any reason to lie. And it made more sense.
Do you think the Daybell kids were coached?
Oh, absolutely. It was one of the worst. I guess there's a little piece of you spend so much time listening to the prosecution and them laying out their case that when it comes to the defense, you're interested to see how is he going to respond to this? How is Pryor going to, set up his defense and his witnesses? And the first 2 being the children, completely coached and unbelievable. And I think the majority of us, we went back into the room, and, you can't discuss the case when the jurors go back into the room yet. But we all just, we didn't have to write anything down because they just were unbelievable,
Wow, that's so interesting. Do you think there was anything in John Pryor's defense that you said, okay, maybe that was solid?
Probably the best try was him having the medical examiner, I believe from California, that said she would have said it was unconclusive or undetermined as far as Tammy's death. But when the prosecution starts saying to get an accurate diagnosis or decision on what the cause of death was, especially after someone's been dead and exhumed and the autopsy done, you not only have to look, of course, at everything they did to examine the body and found nothing as far as would have been naturally occurring problems, but you have to look at the circumstances around the entire case and all the reports. And what came out at the end is that Pryor had only given his medical examiner certain reports from the FBI, from detectives, everything. And when questioned by the prosecution, she was very straightforward. She's like, no, I didn't have that report. No, I didn't have that report. No, I didn't have that report. So that would have probably been the closest, because here's an expert witness that is saying she has a different opinion than what the other forensics pathologist had said prior time. But really, when it came down to it, she didn't have all of the information that the other forensic pathologist had. But beyond that, there was really the other person he hired, the expert witness on DNA. And that gentleman, really all he said was that there was none of Chad Daybell's DNA was on what he had examined. Well, that wasn't surprising to us, because I don't think any of us believed that Chad actually did any of the killing. He just orchestrated it and had it play out. Maybe he helped with Tammy's murder. We'll never know. But as far as physically, doing something with the children, we don't think he did. He might have dug the hole because there wasn't a lot of time in JJ, the time that Alex was at Chad's, when we're assuming he was burying JJ, because that's where they found him. He was only there for a few minutes. and there's no way he could have dug this grave in that amount of time. So we believe if Chad was involved with anything physically, he probably had the grave ready to go when Alex came over with JJ.
And you're aware he used to dig graves.
Yeah, he's a sexton.
And the longest amount of time that Alex was there was the day after Tylee was last seen, September 9th. So that was really a duration of 2 hours.
Right.
So yeah, not direct DNA evidence, but definitely a lot of circumstantial evidence. As all of this is unfolding and you're seeing how just the terrible conditions that JJ and Tylee were found in and how Tammy was suffocated. Did you watch Chad, or were you more focused on the witness?
I mean, most of the time you're focused on the witness, but at times, yeah, you watch Chad, and we were, and when I say we, the jury, we talked a lot about all of this. We were kind of shocked. He really never showed any sort of emotion. There was a couple times, I believe, when there was some of his family members that were talking about the funeral that he like shook his head or something to something that they said. He also tried to, the only time I actually saw him, I don't know if he was really crying or just putting on a good show, was when they had the 911 call of Chad calling about Tammy being dead. This was where Chad was crying, and that's about the closest he came, I think, to crying, but he was pretty stoic the whole time, didn't really show emotion. And I truly believe if he believes everything that he's espoused his whole life, that I think he thinks that there's still a plan for him, or he's still meant to do great things.
Yeah, he didn't even choose to speak or address the court at all. I mean, twice he had the option, and were you expecting him to say anything?
What I wanted, I did want to hear from him, because one of the things that we had to do after we found him guilty, and then we had to decide the death penalty, there's a part in that following the instructions that it qualifies for the death penalty. There was no question. It was heinous. It was done for money. But there is a place that once you agree to that, then you can say, but was there mitigating circumstances that will say that the death penalty was not a just punishment? And if we would have been given anything, I prior hit on it that he'd lived this great life with no speeding tickets for 50 years and had raised 5 children, and he had held some high seats in the LDS church. That was true, but the fact that Chad didn't say anything, didn't have an excuse, didn't say he made a mistake, didn't say he was innocent. At that point, it was like there was no mitigating circumstances to not justify the death penalty after what he did. It was very shocking that he wouldn't say anything.
Did you feel sort of a weight, or I guess how did you feel as you went into deliberations for the sentencing? And actually, if you can just take me through all of sequestration, what that was like.
Well, you're always waiting till the end. I mean, to get to that point when you can deliberate, because you can finally talk about it with your jurors, because you're with these people, 7 to 8 hours a day, actually longer, because we'd have to meet in a parking garage and then be bused secretly over to the courthouse. And then, everything's a hurry up and wait. So you're with these people 8 hours plus a day, but yet you can't talk about the case. So we do get to know each other, and you get to know the 4 deputies and marshals that were always around us. And that's what you have a big camaraderie, but you have not been able to discuss what you see every day. And so as soon as we got the case, we went, and he picked the 12 of us that were the jurors that got to deliberate. We went in, and I bet for about an hour, we just sat around the table and everybody had a chance to say like what was on their mind. We weren't deciding it yet. We were just either asking questions or, can you believe that? Or shocked about this. And it was so cathartic, because we'd been waiting, for 2+ months to be able to do that. So that was in the evening. We stayed there about 2 hours. Then we're sequestered. So when we're sequestered, we all go to a hotel that I guess these rooms have been rented for about 8 weeks, just to be safe in case something went awry and we had to be sequestered earlier. So once we're sequestered, we have to hand in our cell phone. Of course, no laptops, no TVs, no radios or music from the outside. if we had books or we had games, they had to be approved by the judge. And that first night, we couldn't go out of our room. You couldn't go out in the hallway. If you needed something, you could look out, and they'd hired 4 guards that sat on either end of the hallway. So it was really interesting. When you think about what you would do if you were put in a room and you didn't have your cell phone, you didn't have a TV, you didn't have music. I think I ironed all my clothes that I brought, and put them away, and tried to go to bed before 10. So that was the first night. Anyway, yes.
That's strange, right? Because,
Uh-huh.
we live in this world, this digital era where we've got social media, you got your phone. I mean, you have so much access to talk to whoever you want and see whatever you want and keep yourself basically amused. But I mean, it had to be sort of peaceful in this strange way that,
Pieces and parts of it. Yeah. I mean, it was definitely not stressful as far as worrying about what work said or what your family said, because you had no choice. You wouldn't know that. But then we went back the next day and finished deliberating and came up with the verdict as far as being guilty. And then after that, it took a day. And of course, they had what they called the new trial, where they had the victim statements. And we then got the case for deciding punishment. And that was actually harder. I think it was harder for 2 reasons. One, it was a big deal. It's a big responsibility, and it's a big decision to send somebody to death. And we wanted to make sure we were doing it correctly. I think it was a lot more emotional. And it just was, to be honest, it was a lot more confusing too. There was more verbiage you had to follow, and had to make sure you were doing it the correct way according to what your instructions were. We had a couple questions of the judge just to make sure we are interpreting it correctly. A lot of people were a lot more emotional about it, questioning stuff about it, which is good. At the end of the day, we went home that night, probably about 7:30 or 8, with the decision that we would come back in the morning, make sure we were all still on the same page and no one had any questions. And that's what we did, is we came back Saturday morning, and people still actually had a couple questions, especially about the mitigating circumstances I talked about, that we really didn't have a choice if we're following the instructions, that we knew we agreed it was a heinous murder. We agree, all of them were. We agreed that he has no respect for human life. And he would be a threat to society, just the way he can manipulate people without doing anything. So beyond that, if there's not a mitigating circumstance that helped Chad out, that showed us that there was some reason to not give him the death penalty, then he gets the death penalty.
Wow, yeah, he didn't say one thing at all, and there really were no mitigating circumstances that could weigh up against these aggravators. I mean, truly, when you talk about just the money alone, I mean, he made $430,000 off of his wife, and Lori continued to collect checks on her children. So there was really no doubt. You guys were all on the same page. You felt like this was a good team. You guys understood what you guys had listened to all
Absolutely.
trial.
I mean, there was people that would ask more questions, or we went and got more evidence, for example, that they weren't as quick to agree on what's a mitigating circumstance. I think one of the jurors brought up, like I did, that, well, he was a good dad, or he didn't have traffic violations or anything, and he had been a good member of the LDS church. That's fine, but you also have to decide, well, but that's not enough of a mitigating circumstance to say he doesn't deserve the death penalty for murdering 3 people, including his wife and 2 children, horrifically.
May I ask if you ever had an opinion, or did you favor or not favor the death penalty before you ever stepped foot into this courthouse?
I was open to it, but I also knew that it had to fit the instructions, and it had to fit all of the evidence, and I had to be sure myself that he was truly guilty and that it justified it. So yes, I was open to it. I thought it was a valid punishment for certain crimes, but I couldn't go in there saying, well, he's going to get the death penalty. You had to go through the whole process.
Lastly, Tracy, I mean, you've been through 9 weeks of this. You've basically gained friends and bonded with these people who, like you said, you learn so much about their personal lives and who they are without saying one thing about the case and all the, the crazy things and graphic details you were hearing. And finally, you guys were able to help serve justice in this case. Is this sort of one of those life-changing events for you?
Oh, absolutely. All of us agree that we went into it knowing that it was a big case, but until you come out the other side, we were told by one of the marshals, or actually the judge, this was the longest trial in Idaho history, and it was one of the longest capital murder cases in America. So hearing that, we knew why we were so tired at the end and what it took out of us emotionally. And I think we're tired. It's going to be hard to get over wrapping your head around that this truly happened, that there's people out there that would do this. We just hope that we did as much as we possibly could to give him the penalty he deserves, and that maybe we've had already been contacted by the grandpa and grandma and Tammy's brother and thanking us. That was just kind of nice because they were there every day almost, at trial, and you saw them and you know what they've been through. The detectives and the FBI and all of them have, I mean, it's just been amazing what they've been through the last 4 years, and to see the emotions in them, it made you feel like at least you did what you could do.
Tracy, thank you so much for your time and giving that insight. I know this has been not just really a once in a lifetime experience, but really traumatic too for you guys as well. So I hope you get some rest and clear your head and, and take care.
And we'll be ready to watch the Arizona trial when that happens too.
All right, sure thing. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.